Welcome to Seniors Matter. I'm Brenda Charles Edwards, Seniors Matter. We're live every Friday at Winter Time, Radio.world, your community radio station. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Facebook.com, Twitch TV. What's that new name for Twitter? Okay. And of course, on the Rainier Avenue Radio App. I'm going to get it one of these days. We feature interviews with people that provide services or have valuable information for seniors, their families, and the community. Do you need financial documents notarized? Are you a person that needs documents read to you for clarity or completion? Just call me, Brenda, at Black Orchid Notary, 206-683-2636. Tell me where, I'll meet you there. Well, today my guest is Ron Chu. He's a local journalist and activist who will be celebrating the audiobook launch of his memoir, My Unforgotten Seattle. Ron will be at Town Hall on Sunday, February 25th at 1 p.m. So, Ron isn't here yet, but I'm going to talk a little bit about him. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet, but I will soon because I am involved with AARP on the executive council level. And I know that his book is filled with many details of conversations and encounters with other community activists. And Ron has been around for a long time. He was director of the Wing Luke Museum for 17 years and the redevelopment of a historic hotel into the museum's new home. I did have the pleasure of seeing the museum, and it's really fantastic. But now I'm going to let Ron tell you more about this. Welcome, Ron. How are you?
I'm doing great, Brenda. So nice to be here.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad you had a chance to visit the museum.
Oh, I did. It was great. That hotel or the rooms where the people stayed, I couldn't believe how small they were. It's like, man. But the museum is fantastic, and I think everyone should take the opportunity to go see it. So, Ron, what prompted you to write this memoir, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Wow. Well, back in 2015, a good friend of mine, Donnie Chin, a local medic who worked in the Chinatown International District area, was gunned down in the crossfire between two rival gangs. It affected the community greatly because he was very beloved and was on the street dealing with a lot of situations for a long time. It also affected me personally because he was a very close friend. It made me stop and think about Donnie, maybe stop and think about a number of other folks, Bob Santos, who was very active in the area, Charles E. Smith, who had passed away recently, Rachel Hidaka, who is active at Seattle Community College, and a whole slew of other contemporaries, Roberto Maestas, other activists who had worked in the local community. I said, well, I should write something, because working as a journalist prior to my career at the museum, I got a chance to share a lot of conversations and get to know these folks. And I said, well, this is my unforgotten Seattle. And, it'd be nice to share these stories. In addition to which, Brenda, my mother worked as a sewing woman in many of these sewing factories near the waterfront. My father was a waiter at the old Hong Kong restaurant.
Oh, boy.
Back in the day, for any Seattleites who ate there.
I did.
Okay, you're among the group. Anyway, I felt that my mother and my father and all of their peers, they had been left out of the history books because they were just sort of, behind the scenes. And so it was really an attempt to document the stories of people passing, as well as the hidden voices that we never hear from. So that really was what prompted it.
Well, your book is filled with so many details of conversations and encounters with other community activists. How were you able to remember this?
That's a question that a lot of people have asked me, because there actually are specific conversations with people, detailed descriptions and so forth. I'm sure, Brenda, you remember an era before the internet when we sent letters and postcards to folks, and
Yes.
you know, and
And
those.
stamps were cheaper.
Right, exactly. And I, working as a journalist and just being somebody who was kind of into people's stories, I saved all those letters. I saved all those
Mm,
conversations. So when people wrote letters nowadays, of course, you don't really receive letters other than bills and advertising flyers, right? But
right.
but back in the day, people described things. They told you how they felt, things that they had done. So I went back to my letters and postcards, and I recreated situations. I also, having worked as a journalist, uh, learned to remember things and details and to focus on those things. I also kept a journal. And then I went back in the course of researching my Unforgotten Seattle memoir to folks who were still around, and I compared notes. And so I was able to recreate a world that otherwise would have been vanished, and people wouldn't have known had existed.
Wow. So, how has Seattle changed during your lifetime so far?
It's evolved, and again, I'm sure you've seen that too, Brenda. Seattle used to be a smaller place,
Hmm.
less crowded. You could afford housing on Beacon Hill, where I live.
Me too.
Uh, isn't it crazy? And
Yes.
now all of a sudden somebody tells you your house is worth what?
Yeah.
And then you
And
got
then
to
you
pay.
get hit with the property taxes.
Exactly. So you're trying to survive in this world that used to be a little more affordable. Um, so Seattle has changed. It's grown. It's become very, I think, forgetful about its past and the
Mm,
struggles that people went through to create a better life. You have a lot of folks coming here with no sense of history. Um, I remember a time when folks from communities of color collaborated past all the differences that we shared.
yes,
They made things happen. There were protests to bring social services, to make
mhm,
government responsive. And it was a
definitely.
remarkable time back in the 60s and 70s with the civil rights movement. So I wanted to remind people of that change. And it's not simply the physical crowding and expenses, but there's an emotional part. The soul of Seattle has withered because many of us haven't shared our stories.
That is true. And Chinatown, the International District, uh, I know it's changed. How do you see how it's changed?
Well, some of the challenges, Brenda, are still the same. They're older buildings, older brick and mortar buildings that are deteriorating without the presence of public dollars to redevelop them. You still have a lot of small business failures. You have a lot of crime. You have seniors who live in poverty. Um, More recently, there's been a lot of tension, obviously, in that period with the homelessness crisis. Um, a lot of homeless are camped out there. Those problems have always kind of been there a bit, but you know, um, there's also the ugly underbelly of racism that's existed there for a long, long time. The lack of proper response to community needs. During the pandemic, when there were pronouncements about Kung flu and, this Asian virus and stuff.
Mhm.
A lot of us were hurt. There were an increase in attacks of anti-Asian violence. More recently, the Wing Luke Museum, was attacked by a person who bashed out the windows. And so, we have a lot of challenges there. We have an incredible history and presence. And so we've got a ways to go there. But it's changed in some ways with some developments, but a lot of the infrastructure still needs work. And I'm hopeful, working with a lot of younger folks, to continue to push for better situation for everybody in the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Several chapters are devoted to your 17 years as director of the Wing Luke Museum, and redevelopment of a historic hotel, as I was talking about, is now the museum's new home. What were your biggest challenges, Ron?
I think one big challenge was simply raising the money. We were a small historical society. When I first came aboard during the early part of my career there, we started as basically a volunteer historical society. By the time we started our fundraising efforts for the $23 million to remodel that old hotel, we had grown a bit, but we were still really more like a $500,000 operation. So we were going to raise $23 million, on that small budget. But, we persevered, and we succeeded largely through the community support that had been engendered through our community-based grassroots exhibitions, which involved community involvement. So that was one challenge, raising the money. The other was making people believe that this was possible, that you could create an institution based on documenting the lives of ordinary people in the region, bringing in seniors to serve as your scholars and advisors, bringing young community activists in as part of the exhibition program process. So challenges on many, many fronts, but it was an incredible community effort that I was proud to have been part of.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening live to Seniors Matter with your host, Brenda Charles Edwards, on www.rainieravenueradio.world, your South Seattle community radio station, Fridays at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Do you know what's the best legacy you can give ourselves and our loved ones? I just messed that up. Do you know the best legacy we can give ourselves and our loved ones? I've been doing this for a while, but I think it's time for a break. Join me on Zoom for a group or individual session on legacy end-of-life planning. Now back to my guest, Ron Chu. He's a local journalist and activist who's also the executive director of the Wing Luke Museum for 17 years. So, Ron, when you stepped down from your full-time job as director of International Community Health Services Foundations 3 years ago, what are you doing these days to keep you busy?
I joke with folks, Brenda, maybe it's the case with you, you retire, but you end up being busier than you were when you were doing this single focused work life. I'm working on quite a number of projects. I'm still working with International Community Health Services on an aging in place facility up on Beacon Hill. It's right next to Pacific Medical Center on the north parking lot. You may have seen some of the construction going on.
I wondered what that was. So that's what's going on.
Yeah, there's housing. There's going to be affordable housing on the site. There's also going to be Centro de la Raza is doing a childcare center. And then the piece that I'm involved in, Brenda, is the senior care aging in place facility, 25,000 square feet. And it'll provide an opportunity for many of us who are aging, myself included, to stay in our homes and receive wraparound services that enable us to stay in place. So I'm working on that. I'm working with a number of other nonprofit organizations, helping with organizational capacity building, and fundraising. Um, the thing I'm most proud about is having the opportunity to work with a lot of younger folks. So I do mentor a lot of younger folks coming up through the ranks. I'm sure you do a bit of that yourself. Just sharing life lessons. We may have been around a bit. The body is a little bit more creaky than it used to be, but we're still there, hopefully cognitively. And then there are things to share, and they're very open to learning from us. So I do a lot of that mentoring as well.
So is that why you took up running when you were about to turn 60?
I took up running, yes, because the body was creaking, and I go out every morning for an hour and a half or so. I do a pretty long, kind of a very slow run, anywhere from 10 to 13 miles every morning.
10 to 13 miles?
Yep. Everyone says you're crazy. You're doing a half marathon every morning. I said, yep, but I go slow. And it's part of what I try to tell folks, all of my peers as seniors. You can do whatever you want.
True.
There's nothing to prevent you, but you got to build up slowly, and you got to allow yourself, the grace of being able to say, hey, it's okay to go slow, or it's okay to stop and take a break. But, seniors, all of us, I'm going to be turning 71 soon. I mean, people said, that's crazy. You're not supposed to be able. I said, whatever you think you can do, you can do. Whatever you think you can't do, you cannot do. So if you want
I
to run, go
love
run,
that.
right?
I love that because age is a state of mind. I've always said that. And mine is not one to be old and decrepit and can't do anything.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of health benefits to keeping cognitively active, and physically active. And because we have more of this crystallized intelligence from having been around a while, we can use that knowledge to act more sensibly, and to deal with, like eat a little better, maintain your social relationships, keep up your friendships, spend time doing the things that are important.
Absolutely. And Ron, I'm not one to do New Year's resolutions, but what I'm finding is that I'm trying to prioritize what's important to me and what gives joy to me. And I don't work out like I would like to, but I'm not condemning myself either. I just
Exactly.
try to choose more of the types of food I eat.
Yeah, and we can all do something in some arena, whether it's physical activity. If you don't like running, well, just walk. If you don't like walking, do Zumba, whatever it is that, and not beat yourself up about it. But it's really what you talked about is being more mindful, how you spend your time, because at some point it's going to be over. And so use that time you got left, whatever it is, to enjoy it.
Yes, that is very true. So, do you advise others, or would you advise others in looking into writing a memoir? And if so, how would they go about it?
I actually have been advising quite a number of folks to write their stories, because for our generation, what do you want to leave behind? Well, stories can be powerful, whether
True.
you videotape it, whether you, share it on social media, whether you write it down in whatever form. This journey of writing this book was a little bit of an exercise to me. Like, can I actually do this thing? Write a memoir? I mean, I worked as a journalist, but you're talking about 800-word stories. I mean, this ended up being a 700-page book with
Wow.
big print, because I can't see very well. So I want my peers to be able to see it. Short
I love it.
chapters, because you want to pop in and out. A lot of pictures,
Oh, good.
so everyone has a story in them, many stories. And for that next generation, we can leave that behind, and feel proud that what we might take for granted and see as ordinary is
Mhm.
pretty special.
So is there an order that one might want to look at? I mean, I know, especially if you're have paper, is there a way to start a file? Is there an organization system that needs to be in place?
Boy, this is probably a whole nother podcast, but because I have a lot of things I learned from this process. But there are lots of ways to bake the cake. Um, you could start with just, I mean, people think, oh my God, how do you create a book? Well, you create it sentence by sentence, word by word. So maybe you're just writing 2 paragraphs and that's the chapter. But then after you write it, you start editing it, and then you add detail. Um, and you start doing research. I started with just a number of just chapter headings. I mean, they basically were sections of my life. And then some of them became chapters, some of them I tossed aside. Um, One small lesson I'll share is that I was trying to figure out how the heck do I write a memoir? What does it look like? So I went to the library, just started reading other memoirs. Uh,
Ah,
and then I realized, well, what suited me was a simple style because I'm not an academic, so I can't write long dependent clauses and big sentences because I'm more trained as a journalist. So I went to the children's section. I started reading children's books. And the thing that had happened, Brenda, during that process, it made me aware of the importance of clarity and not trying to impress people. You're trying to communicate, right? So sometimes just these little exercises, go to your local library and just pick out some good authors and figure out how did they do it. Because often these children's books are fairly short, and the sentence structure is simple, but those words say a lot. They convey a lot with fewer words. But yeah, I've learned so much about writing and about doing the memoir. And again, I tell folks, anybody can do it. Anybody.
so Ron, I joined a book club recently, and I'm trying to figure out the best way for me to get these books read because I really want to be involved and read more, but I have an active life and I have Audible. So I've gotten some of the books on Audible. And like yesterday, I was sitting at, my mother had a dentist appointment. So I was sitting there waiting while she was getting her teeth cleaned. And I had my Audible book going. And so, but I also am a visual person. And Audible's good, but I'm not sure if that's the best way
Yeah.
for me to read a book.
Here's a suggestion which I incorporated into my life. Um, Being seniors, we're very conscious of the importance of structuring our lives. So getting enough sleep, getting good nutrition, getting some physical activity, maintaining social relationships, and so forth. I've structured my life, as I mentioned, an hour and a half in the morning to go on my slow run. And every day I'm out there, it doesn't matter. At nighttime, I've found that this is a great exercise for huge benefits. I read for at least an hour before I go to bed. I have a physical book, and it does a number of things. One, it allows you to have time after your last meal to let it digest before you go to bed, because there are health benefits to that. And then I'm learning. I'm using my mind, and it just becomes a ritual, much like brushing your teeth. And I look forward to that time because it's sort of it's kind of quiet time. You allow your body to move into that digestive state, the melatonin to kind of bring on sleep and so forth. So it just becomes a ritual every evening. Right by my bedside before I go to bed, I read for an hour. Usually it ends up being like 2 hours, and now it's 2.5 hours. You see how these little habits, like, you incorporate them. So I would say, Brenda, structure it. Put
Okay.
it somewhere. If you're a visual person, get a physical book. The library, there's free stuff
Right.
there.
And I have both libraries, King County and Seattle. So yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's
Okay,
great.
that sounds good. Geez, thanks, Ron. You've been very inspirational and helpful, and I'm glad that I'm getting to meet you now because I'm probably not going to be able to meet you on Sunday. And by the way, folks, as I've said before, Ron is going to be at Town Hall on Sunday. Excuse me, on Sunday the 25th. Right, Ron?
Yep. February 25th.
At 1 o'clock. So you really want to go out and meet him. He's, as you have heard, he has a lot of knowledge and he has a wonderful soul. So I think that you would do yourself a great injustice if you don't get a chance to meet him. This is Brenda Charles Edwards, host of Seniors Matter. As I said, you can hear us and see us every Friday at 12:30. And this weekend is my guest, Ron Chu, is going to be at the town hall. And also for Black History Month, we have at the Rainier Avenue radio station, we have the Black History Museum, which is the Columbia City Theater from Tuesday through Sunday through February 29th. So there's a lot of history going on there too. Please check us out. Ron, you take care. Look forward to talking with you again. Everyone, have a great weekend. Be safe and live your life like it's golden. Bye, Ron.
Thank you, Brenda.